Rain lashed Willow Creek. Ethan peered through the car window. The old house loomed, shrouded in mist. It had been his grandparents' home. Now it was his. He parked the car, the engine ticking in the silence. The air felt heavy, burdened with unseen things.
All right, here we go.
He grabbed his bag, the house beckoning him closer. The front door creaked open. Dust motes danced in the faint light. The air was stale, thick with the scent of decay. Ethan stepped inside, a shiver crawling down his spine. Each footstep echoed in the silence. He was alone, yet the house felt far from empty. He wandered through darkened rooms, each one filled with forgotten memories. Furniture draped in white sheets, shadows lurking in the corners. The house held its breath, secrets clinging to the walls. Ethan could sense them, whispering his name. He climbed the stairs, each step groaning in protest. The air grew colder as he ascended. The attic door loomed at the top. A single ray of light pierced through a crack, illuminating dust motes swirling in the air. Ethan reached for the handle, his heart pounding in his chest.
What secrets are you hiding up here?
The attic was a tomb of forgotten things. Cobwebs draped the rafters like macabre decorations. Ethan stepped inside, his breath catching in his throat. The musty smell of old paper filled the air. He ran his fingers along a dusty shelf, leaving a trail in his wake. A glint of metal caught his eye. A tarnished silver locket lay nestled amongst the clutter. He picked it up, the metal cold against his skin. It was engraved with a single word, Willow.
Willow? What does that mean?
Ethan turned it over in his hands, a sense of foreboding washing over him. He continued his exploration, drawn deeper into the attic's embrace. A stack of old books lay piled in the corner, their leather covers cracked and faded. Ethan knelt down, his fingers tracing the embossed titles. One book bound in dark leather seemed to pulse with an unseen energy. He pulled it free, the pages brittle with age. The title, written in an elegant script, sent a chill down his spine. The History of Willow Creek. As he opened the book, a dried, pressed flower fell from its pages. It crumbled into dust as it touched the ground. Ethan began to read, each word drawing him further into the town's dark past. The pages whispered of a time long ago, of settlers who had come to Willow Creek seeking a new life, of a darkness that had taken root in the fertile ground, and of a secret society bound by blood and ancient rituals. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He realized he had stumbled upon something sinister, something that had been hidden for generations, and he couldn't shake the feeling that it was somehow connected to him.
This can't be real, but it feels so familiar.
Ethan sat by the attic window. The storm raged outside. Rain lashed against the glass. He opened the old book, its pages brittle with age. The words blurred before his eyes. He rubbed his tired eyes and began to read. The book spoke of a cult, a group known as the Keepers.
The Keepers? What kind of cult is this?
They worshipped an ancient entity, a being of immense power. The entity promised them prosperity in exchange for loyalty. Ethan shivered. The air grew colder. He felt a presence behind him. He turned, his heart pounding in his chest. The attic was empty. He returned to the book, his fingers tracing the faded ink. The Keepers performed rituals, dark, blood-soaked rituals. They sacrificed animals, then people. Ethan slammed the book shut. He couldn't stomach anymore. He stood up, his head spinning. He had to get out of the attic. As he turned to leave, he noticed a wooden chest tucked beneath the eaves. It was old, its surface covered in carvings. He knelt down and ran his hand over the intricate designs. They seemed to writhe and twist under his touch. He lifted the heavy lid. Inside he found stacks of old diaries, bound in leather, their pages yellowed with age. He picked one up. It was his great-grandmother's diary. He opened it, his hands trembling. The first entry sent a chill down his spine.
They call it a pact, she wrote. but it feels more like a curse.
Ethan read on, his heart pounding in his chest. His great-grandmother had been a member of the Keepers. She had participated in their rituals. She had made a deal with the entity. The entity had granted her power, wealth, and influence, but it had taken something in return: her soul. Ethan closed the diary, his mind reeling. His own bloodline was tainted by this darkness. He was bound to it, whether he liked it or not.
My own family involved in this madness?
He picked up another diary. This one belonged to his grandfather. He flipped through the pages, his eyes scanning the entries. His grandfather had known about the Keepers. He had tried to stop them, but they had silenced him. Ethan felt a surge of anger. These people had murdered his own flesh and blood, and now he would make them pay. He would expose their secrets. He would bring them down. He stood up, his jaw set. He had a lot of work to do. He gathered the diaries, their leather cold against his skin. He would study them. He would learn everything he could about the Keepers. He would find a way to break the curse that haunted his family. As he left the attic, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched.
I will end this, no matter what it takes.
Ethan sat at the kitchen table. The diaries spread out before him. He had been reading for hours, but he was no closer to understanding the true nature of the Keeper's power. He rubbed his tired eyes. He needed a break.
I need a break.
He stood up and walked over to the window. The storm had passed. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the town. He looked out at the familiar streets, but something felt different. Off.
Something feels different.
His gaze fell on the old church at the end of the street. It was a Gothic structure, its spire reaching towards the sky like a skeletal finger. He had always found it unsettling. Now he knew why. He grabbed his jacket and headed outside. He needed to see the church up close. He needed to feel its energy.
I need to feel its energy.
As he walked, he noticed something strange. Almost every house in town had the same symbol carved into the front door, a circle with a dot in the center. He had seen the symbol before, in the diaries. It was the symbol of the Keepers. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. The cult was still active, and they were everywhere.
The cult is still active, and they're everywhere.
He quickened his pace, his mind racing. He had to find out what they were planning. He had to stop them. The church loomed before him, its shadow stretching out like a dark embrace. Ethan took a deep breath and stepped inside. The forest pressed in around them. Ethan and Sarah walked in silence, their breath misting in the cold air. They had been following the path for hours, the pages of the old book their only guide. The book spoke of a clearing, a place of power, a place where the veil between worlds was thin.
Are you sure this is the right way?
Sarah whispered, her voice trembling.
I don't know, but we have to try. We have to find out what happened to those people.
He tightened his grip on the book, its leather cold against his skin. A gust of wind howled through the trees, scattering leaves like confetti. The forest seemed to press closer, the shadows deepening around them. Ethan shone his flashlight ahead, the beam swallowed by the darkness, and then he saw it. A break in the trees, a clearing bathed in an ethereal light. Ethan felt a shiver run down his spine. This was the place, he could feel it.
Come on, let's see what secrets this place holds.
He took Sarah's hand, his fingers intertwining with hers. The clearing was eerily silent. No bird sang, no insects chirped. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Ethan and Sarah stood at the edge of the clearing, their eyes adjusting to the strange light. The air shimmered as if a fire burned unseen. In the center of the clearing stood an ancient oak tree. Its branches reached towards the sky like skeletal arms. Ethan felt a pull towards it, a compulsion he couldn't explain. He took a step forward, then another. Sarah followed close behind, her hand still clasped in his.
Ethan, are you sure about this?
As they approached the tree, the air grew colder. Ethan felt a presence behind him, watching them. He turned, but there was nothing there. He shook his head, his heart pounding in his chest. He was letting his imagination run wild. He reached out and touched the rough bark of the tree. A jolt of energy surged through him, sending him reeling backwards.
Ethan, are you all right?
Sarah cried out, rushing to his side. Ethan lay on the ground, his vision blurred. He could see images flashing before his eyes, dark images, disturbing images. He saw people dressed in hooded robes, their faces hidden in shadow. He saw a stone altar stained with blood. He saw himself. He gasped, sitting up, his breath ragged. The visions were gone, but the terror remained.
What did you see?
Sarah asked, her voice filled with concern.
I saw everything. The past, the present, and the future. Who are you? What do you want?
I am the one who has always been here, Ethan. The one who watches. The one who waits. I can give you what you desire, Ethan. Power, wealth, immortality. All you have to do is make a deal.
What kind of deal?
A simple exchange, Ethan. Your soul for hers.
No, I won't do it. I won't let you take her.
You misunderstand, Ethan. I'm not asking. I'm telling you will make the deal or she will suffer the consequences.
Ethan felt a surge of anger. He wouldn't let this monster hurt her. He had to do something, but what?
A soul for a soul, but what does it mean?
You're out of time, Ethan. Make your choice.
Ethan looked from the figure to Sarah, his heart pounding in his chest. He had to make a decision, and he had to make it now. The weight of Sarah's words settled upon Ethan's chest, heavy and cold. His ancestry, a lineage he had once embraced with pride, now felt like a venomous serpent coiling around his heart. The diary's revelations, the symbol etched on doors, the strange behavior of the townsfolk, it all pointed to a terrifying truth.
If I'm the key, then what does Marcus want from me?
He paced the confines of the old house, each step echoing in the cavernous space. The diaries lay scattered on the floor, testaments to a past he could no longer outrun.
He wants to use you, Ethan. He wants to twist your connection to the cult to amplify his power, but we won't let him. We'll find a way to break this curse together.
Her words, though resolute, did little to quell the maelstrom brewing within Ethan's soul. He stared out the window, the last vestiges of daylight painting the sky in hues of purple and blood orange. The townsfolk moved below, their movements strangely synchronized, their faces vacant and emotionless.
They're gathering at the church. We need to stop them, but how? We don't even know what they're planning.
Doubt gnawed at him, a relentless beast threatening to consume his resolve. The church loomed before them, a Gothic monolith against the darkening sky. Its stained glass windows, once depictions of biblical scenes, were now dark, vacant eyes staring out into the night. The air crackled with an oppressive energy, a tangible manifestation of the darkness that had taken root within.
Ready?
Ethan's hand trembled as he reached for Sarah's. Her grip was firm, a reassuring presence in the face of the unknown.
We have to do this, Ethan. For the town, for ourselves.
They slipped through the shadows, their footsteps muffled by the damp grass. The murmur of voices grew louder as they approached the church, a low, rhythmic chanting that sent chills down Ethan's spine. Peeking through a crack in the heavy oak door, they beheld a sight that sent a shiver down their spines. The church's interior, usually illuminated by the soft glow of candlelight, was bathed in an unnatural crimson light emanating from a large obsidian bowl placed upon the altar. Townsfolk, their faces contorted in a mixture of ecstasy and fear, swayed in unison, their chanting growing in intensity. At the head of the congregation, cloaked in a hooded robe that did little to conceal his malevolent aura, stood Marcus. His voice, amplified by the acoustics of the ancient structure, resonated through the church, each word dripping with power and malice. "The time is nigh," Marcus intoned, his voice a hypnotic drone that seemed to seep into Ethan's very bones. "The old ways shall be reborn, and Willow Creek shall rise again, but first a sacrifice must be made." Ethan's blood ran cold. He knew with a sickening certainty who that sacrifice would be. He exchanged a look with Sarah, her eyes wide with fear and determination. They had to act, and quickly. Before either of them could react, Marcus turned, his gaze seemingly piercing through the veil of shadows that concealed them. His lips curled into a cruel smile, his eyes gleaming with an unholy light.
So eager to join us, Ethan? Your presence is both expected and appreciated. You see, you are the key to completing the ritual, the final ingredient in our ascendance.
He gestured towards the obsidian bowl, the crimson light within pulsating with an unsettling rhythm.
With your blood, we shall unleash a power unlike any other. Willow Creek will be ours, and you, Ethan, will rule by my side.
Ethan's mind raced. His thoughts a chaotic jumble of fear, anger, and confusion. He wanted to scream, to lash out, but he knew that any rash action could have dire consequences. Sarah's hand tightened on his, her touch a lifeline in the encroaching darkness.
Don't listen to him, Ethan. We can fight this together.
But the choice, as always, remained Ethan's to make. The weight of the town's fate, the fate of his friend, rested upon his shoulders. Silence hung heavy in the air. Ethan's words, his confession, echoed in the hallowed halls of the church. The townsfolk, their faces a mixture of confusion and fear, parted before him, their eyes wide and wary. Marcus, however, seemed unfazed, his smile widening into a grotesque mockery of delight.
Yes, Ethan, you are indeed a descendant of the cult's founders. Your bloodline is strong, potent, the perfect vessel for our power.
He extended a hand towards the obsidian bowl, the crimson light within pulsing with a hypnotic rhythm. Ethan felt a pull towards the bowl, an almost irresistible urge to reach out, to touch the pulsating light. He stumbled back, his hand flying to his head, as if to ward off an unseen force. He could feel the darkness within him stirring, responding to the call of its ancient master.
Resist it, Ethan. You are not your ancestors. You have a choice.
Her words cut through the fog that had settled over his mind. He looked at her, her face pale but resolute, her eyes shining with a strength that mirrored his own. He drew strength from her presence, a flicker of defiance igniting within his soul.
You want my blood, Marcus? Come and take it.
Marcus's smile faltered, his eyes narrowing with a hint of annoyance. He raised his hand, the shadows in the church deepening, swirling around him like a living shroud.
The chanting of the townsfolk intensified, their voices morphing into a guttural, primal sound that sent shivers down Ethan's spine.
So be it. If you will not join us willingly, then we will take what is rightfully ours.
The shadows coalesced, taking on monstrous shapes that lurched towards Ethan and Sarah, their forms shifting and writhing with an unnatural fluidity. The air grew thick with the stench of decay, a miasma of fear and despair that threatened to overwhelm them. Ethan pushed Sarah behind him, his heart pounding in his chest. He had no weapon, no defense against these creatures of darkness except for his own will and the flickering flame of defiance that burned within him. He raised his hands, his mind racing, searching for any shred of knowledge, any power that might lie dormant within his blood. And then he remembered. The diary, the ritual, a desperate gamble, a slim chance of survival. He closed his eyes, focusing his will, reaching deep within himself, seeking the echoes of his ancestors, not for power but for protection.
Sarah, find the circle, the salt circle. We need to get inside it.
Sarah, her eyes wide with fear but her movements swift and sure, scrambled towards the altar, dodging the grasping claws of the shadow creatures. She had seen the circle etched into the stone floor beneath the altar, a faint outline barely visible beneath centuries of dust and grime. Ethan, his hands glowing with a faint ethereal light, held the creatures at bay, his mind a whirlwind of ancient words, of forgotten rituals. He could feel the power coursing through him, raw and untamed. But it was not the malevolent energy of Marcus and his cult. This was something different, something older, something protective. A wave of energy erupted from his hands, throwing the shadow creatures back, momentarily holding them at bay.
Sarah, now!
Sarah, her face pale but determined, reached the altar and stepped within the salt circle. She turned, her hand outstretched towards Ethan, her eyes pleading.
Ethan, come on!
He lunged towards her, the shadow creatures closing in, their forms shifting and swirling, their eyes burning with hatred and hunger. He could feel their cold touch brushing against his skin, their claws tearing at his clothes. He stumbled, falling to his knees just within the circle. The moment he crossed the threshold, the air crackled with energy. A blinding light erupted from the center of the circle, throwing the shadow creatures back against the walls of the church. Ethan and Sarah shielded their eyes, their ears ringing from the deafening roar that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. And then, as suddenly as it began, the light faded. Silence descended once again upon the church. But it was a different kind of silence now. It was the silence of anticipation, of a battle joined, of a reckoning about to unfold. The church held its breath. Ethan's heart pounded against his ribs. Sarah's hand tightened around his. He looked into her eyes, fear mirrored in their depths.
A life for a life, your friend's soul for your power, a simple exchange.
Marcus's laughter echoed, cold and sharp like shards of ice. He gestured toward the obsidian bowl, the crimson light within swirling, a vortex of dark energy. Ethan felt a tug, a pull towards the bowl. Deep within him something resonated with its power. He saw visions flash before his eyes, power beyond measure, control over the shadows, dominion over Willow Creek. But the visions were tainted, twisted. He saw Sarah consumed by darkness, her light extinguished. He stumbled back, shaking his head, the visions receding.
No, there's always another way.
He met Sarah's gaze, her fear giving way to determination. They wouldn't be pawns in Marcus's game.
You think you can defy me? You're a descendant of the cult. The power is in your blood.
The shadows around Marcus writhed, eager to obey his command. Ethan felt a surge of anger, hot and fierce. He wouldn't let Marcus control him. He wouldn't let fear dictate his actions. He would find another way, a way to break the cycle, to save Sarah, to free Willow Creek from the clutches of the cult. He closed his eyes, focusing on the echoes of the past swirling within him. He remembered the diaries, the rituals, the whispers of a power older than the cult, a power that predated the darkness. He reached for it, a lifeline in the encroaching shadows. The air around him crackled with energy. The salt circle beneath their feet flared with a blinding light. Ethan felt a surge of power, but it was different this time. It was warm, vibrant, alive. It flowed through him, not seeking to control, but to protect. The shadow creatures shrieked, recoiling from the light. The townsfolk gasped, shielding their eyes. Marcus stumbled back, his composure finally broken, his face contorted in a mask of rage and fear.
What is this? This power, it's not possible.
Ethan opened his eyes, his gaze steady, his voice filled with a newfound strength.
You're wrong, Marcus. This isn't the power of the cult. This is the power of Willow Creek, the power of the land, the power that predates your darkness.
He stepped forward, the light from the circle intensifying, pushing back the shadows, bathing the church in its warm embrace. He could feel the presence of something ancient, something powerful, something good answering his call. The battle for Willow Creek had just begun. The air crackled, charged with unseen forces. Ethan stood tall, the light of the circle flowing around him, a beacon in the encroaching darkness. He met Marcus's gaze, no longer afraid. The power coursing through him was wild, ancient, yet it felt right, a part of him, a part of Willow Creek itself.
You cannot win. The pact, the blood, it binds this town.
He gestured to the townsfolk, their faces still vacant, yet a flicker of doubt played in their eyes. The hold was weakening.
This town is more than your twisted rituals.
He could feel Sarah beside him, her fear replaced by a fierce determination. They were in this together, fighting for their town, for their lives, for their very souls. The shadows around Marcus thrashed, a physical manifestation of his waning power. He lunged, a figure of darkness and rage, but Ethan stood firm. The light surged, meeting the shadows head-on. A blinding flash, a deafening roar, and then silence. Ethan lowered his hand, the light receding. The shadows were gone, the townsfolk blinking in confusion as if awakening from a dream. Marcus lay crumpled on the floor, his form flickering, fading, consumed by the darkness he had tried to wield. Ethan rushed to Sarah's side, relief washing over him as he met her gaze. It was over, for now. The church was silent, the only sound their ragged breaths and the soft whisper of the wind through the broken windows. The scent of ozone lingered in the air, a reminder of the power that had surged through the room. The townsfolk, their faces etched with confusion and newfound hope, began to stir. They looked at Ethan and Sarah, their eyes filled with questions, with gratitude, with the weight of generations finally lifted. Willow Creek was free. As the first rays of dawn pierced through the broken windows, painting the church in hues of gold and rose, Ethan felt a profound sense of peace settle over him. The darkness had been vanquished, but he knew the fight was far from over. The echoes of the past, the whispers of the cult, still lingered, a reminder of the fragility of their victory. He took Sarah's hand, their fingers intertwining, their strength renewed. There was much to do, much to heal, much to rebuild. But together they would face the future, guided by the light that had bloomed in the heart of darkness. The whispers in the wind, once filled with fear and dread, now carried a message of hope, a promise of a new dawn for Willow Creek.